this is a conversion chart that we came up with for doing smart piecing when the rulers first came out, but it applies to your AccuQuilt. So you need to keep this by your AccuQuilt dies, because this is how you're going to figure out how to convert these over. So a quarter square, okay, so half square. So let's go over what this says. So this is what we just talked about. A half square is x minus 3/8 of an inch. So if we look at x is the traditional instructions. So that's 2 7/8 in this situation. So 2 7/8 minus 3/8 is 2 4/8, right? 2 4/8 is 2 1/2. Okay, so that is your half square ruler. So it says cut the strip. So this is for cutting it with the Nifty Notion or Good Measure rulers. So now you know when you're looking at your AccuQuilt that it's the same thing. So if your traditional instruction says 2 7/8, you're looking for 2 1/2 or 2-inch finish. Okay. The traditional instructions would say cut a 5 1/4 inch square and cut it twice to make 4 triangles. Okay, that's your traditional instructions. And this is what your AccuQuilt die looks like. So again, we already have our dog ears out of that, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, with the quarter square, what you're looking at, we talked about here, we talked about the height of that unit. We're looking at the same thing with this guy. So you really need to, when you're reading a pattern, this is where you want to keep this piece handy. Strip cutting die. So all of the dies have these lines that are printed on them. Some of the dies you're cutting 2 strips, some of them you're cutting 3 strips at a time. Since this one is a wider die, you're only cutting 1 strip at a time. So I just have the 2 blades that are on here. So the 1 set of blades that are on here. So same thing as traditional cutting, that you line up your fabric and cut it, you know, same quantity that you're laying in there. But then so you can cut these just as your whatever size strip, but then you can use the lines that are printed on here to cut different sized shapes. So if you took that strip out and then aligned it with the 90-degree line, it's going to recut it here and you're going to end up with squares. Okay, so this is one way to get your squares. If you lined it up with the 30-degree line, you're going to get the angles for a Lemoyne star, for a Lone Star. If you line it up with the 45-degree line, you're going to get your miter. If you line it up with the 60-degree line, you're going to get these diamonds. Okay? So you've got all these different lines that are on here that you can line things up with. The reason that I used this one was because I wanted to do one of the cube quilts. And so this was one I've looked and looked and looked, and I finally found in Kate's Quilts in Italy book. This is a fabulous book because it is very scrappy driven. And so what's unique about this one is that you're sewing this all together in strips instead of units. So a traditional block like this, you're going to have your top and you're going to have your sides. Okay? And then you have Y seam. And you have a Y seam. And 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 a Y seam. Okay? So instead, what you're doing, and how he shows in this book, is that you're doing the 60-degree triangle for the top. Put a different color in here. And so you have a seam in there, but now you're sewing it together in rows instead. Okay? So to do this, I used my strip cutting ruler, and I cut my strips, and then I cut my diamonds using the 60-degree line. And it's going to recut it here. So it automatically does it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's automatically does it. And that's why using this instead of a template is so worthwhile, because with a template, you really have to have a template and be able to cut all the way around it to get that length correct. Yep. So, and you doing it this way, sewing it in the rows, you're avoiding all the Y seams. It's a simple seaming. The other thing that I do with this, so we talked about conserving our fabric and conserving our mats. So when I was doing these guys, I would line this up and then use my smaller mat and just cover up where I needed it to cut. Because not only does this conserve your mat, it also saves you time, because with these longer dies, it takes longer to go through the machine. And so regardless of if it's a hand crank or if it's the electric, as soon as you get past the mat, you can just pull the rest of it through. Whereas if I had put a mat on the whole thing, I have to either hand crank it or let the machine run it all the way through to the end. Whereas if I'm using the smaller mat, as soon as it hits the end of that mat, I can pull it through. It's released the pressure because there's not all those layers. So it's a time saver as well as a mat saver for you too. Okay? So get comfortable using your smaller mats. You don't always have to use that big mat. You'll use it when you cut the strip, but when you go and you're subcutting those pieces down, you do not need to use that big mat.
And these are 2.5 inch.
This is a big one. This is a 5.5 inch cut. It comes in like a 1 inch up to, I think it's 6.5 inches. 6 or 6.5 is the largest size for this. The 2.5 inch strip is the most popular one because you know a lot of patterns are written that way. You can make your own jelly rolls out of your own scraps, but there's lots of different sizes of these dies that you can get. Okay, you can do the same thing with all of them.